Right now, across the globe, the UN stands by America as we struggle for democracy, human rights, and world prosperity. We need the UN to run smoothly because we have a stake in where the UN is headed. We need the UN to continue, even hurry on its current course, straight towards a more stable and prosperous world that serves America's strategic, economic, humanitarian, and political interests. As we meet here today, votes in Sudan are being counted to determine whether South Sudan should secede. America has strongly backed this process with enormous diplomatic and financial contribution, and in that we are joined by the United Nations, which has allocated money and more than 10,000 UN workers, peacekeepers, and volunteers to support the referendum. In Cote d'Ivoire, where the U.S. has long sought peace and stability, the entire UN system holds fast for democracy and against genocide. The Security Council has called on the nation's defeated president to recognize the results of the referendum, and UN peacekeepers now stand as the sole line of protection for Cote d'Ivoire's democratically elected president. The UN has partnered with America to battle the nuclear threat Iran poses. Just last summer, the UN Security Council imposed its toughest ever sanctions on Iran. Defense Secretary Gates heaped praise on the UN resolution, and EU and others have joined America in putting in place tough sanctions that are having an economic impact on the Iranian government. In Afghanistan, the UN has joined American forces to promote security and battle the rise of extremist forces. The UN provided support for Afghanistan's independent electoral authorities and has facilitated the removal of landmines and weapons, making Afghanistan safer for civilians and American forces. And not far from our shores, the UN battles mightily to stabilize and reconstruct earthquake-shattered Haiti, a country with close ties to America. UN peacekeepers patrol the streets, provide security to many displaced Haitians, train Haitian police, and feed nearly 2 million Haitians a day. And right here at home, the UN is promoting American economic interests and creating jobs. For every dollar invested by the U.S. in the UN, American firms receive approximately $1.50 in UN contracts and other benefits. As we've heard from the witnesses who preceded me, the UN is not a perfect institution, but it serves a near-perfect purpose to bolster American interests from Africa to the Western Hemisphere and to allow our nation to share the burden of promoting international peace and stability. The UN now has greatly improved its ability to identify and correct waste, fraud, and abuse. The General Assembly created the Independent Audit Advisory Committee, a move recommended by the Gingrich-Mitchell UN Task Force, and which is now headed by David Walker, the former U.S. Comptroller and head of GAO. The Secretary General recently appointed a Canadian with decades of auditing and oversight experience as Undersecretary General for Internal Oversight Services. The UN has also moved aggressively to strengthen its ethical culture. A new UN ethics office is in place, and all UN funds and programs created individual ethics offices or agreed to use the Secretariat's ethics office. Led by a U.S. attorney, the UN ethics office oversees the new financial disclosure statements required by UN employees above a certain level and with fiduciary responsibilities. Since 2007, the UN has mandated ethics and integrity training for all UN staff members. Over the past 2 years, the UN has also taken significant steps to ensure that the most productive and effective workforce possible. The UN created a professional and independent system made up of 15 judges to address employment issues. The U.S. decision to join the Human Rights Council has also produced tangible results. The U.S. led 55 other countries in a successful effort to criticize Iran for its human rights violations. Effective U.S. diplomacy has also improved the Council's ability to address specific countries of concern. Nevertheless, some of the most challenging and serious human rights violations continue to go unaddressed, and the Council itself places undue focus on Israel. As with any public institution, fine-tuning the operation is a continual process, but the UN is a very different institution today than it was just 5 or 6 years ago. The UN has implemented most of the reform recommendations made by the congressionally mandated task force on the UN and by Paul Volcker's Independent Investigation Commission. But further progress will not happen unless the U.S. is at the table pressing for changes. And that means that we must pay our dues to the UN on time and in full without threats of withholding our contribution. When we act otherwise, we send a strong and provocative signal that we are more interested in tearing the UN down than making it better and going it alone rather than working with all sides. Over the last few years, as Congress has paid our dues without drama and delay, we have been able to work well with the UN to move forward on many important management changes. And polls tell us that cooperation is what the American people want, In bipartisan research released by BWC this October, 63% of Americans support payment of U.S. dues to the UN on time and in full, and 70% felt the same way about UN peacekeeping dues. But in the end, we need to pay our UN dues, not just because it's popular, but because it's necessary to maintain a healthy UN ready to stand by America and our deep and abiding interest in peace, stability, and democracy around the world. Thank you.